Brandon.
Can you hear them? Yeah. We can hear them. Hello.
Okay.
Is it not connected? Yeah. Okay, it's first. Can you hear us? Switch on. The right audio.
Yashima, can you hear us?
Yes, I
Yes,
can.
She was not talking.
Yeah, it's okay.
Miraculous. Everything is well.
Mhm. Okay.
I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings.
All right. Well, yesterday Tika sent me a message and she asked me to retranslate these 2 pages from the text. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
So first I was like, no way. And I decided to do it. So I did it, but I just quickly, I did it only quickly. So I didn't look at the English just to be objective as much as possible. At the very end, I just changed 1 or 2 things. I did go back to the English. I can send it to you, but maybe I just read through it quickly. This is how I understand it. And of course, it's always subjective. All right, so the ways, and one thing I did, I'm not comfortable with the word cognition, but it's just a matter of getting used to it. There's not much of a problem. So thinking of cognition as having the same meaning as mind or consciousness is fine, which is why I continue using cognition. I don't want to change too much in the original. So I'll just read it. In order to properly understand the presentation of cognition, earlier Buddhist texts, it says earlier Buddhist text. What is earlier Buddhist text? It doesn't classify. It doesn't have to, it doesn't specify. It doesn't have to be the first Buddhist text, whatever earlier means. I mean, old Buddhist texts present a variety of methods of classification. These include, first, dividing cognition into 7 types, then dividing cognition into 3 types, and thirdly, dividing cognition into 2 types. So dividing cognition into 7 types, direct perception, I use the same term, direct perception, inference, subsequent cognition, correct assumption, inattentive perception. I mean, awareness to which the object appears but is not ascertained. I know it's a mouthful. No need to say that. I think inattentive perception is a good word. The English in science and philosophy is quite different. I forget now what it is, determinative or something. Doubt and wrong consciousness. Instead of distorted, I think wrong consciousness works better, but it's just my opinion. So these 7 will be explained in detail below in the section on how cognition engages with its object. Second is dividing cognition into 3 types. Number 1, conceptual consciousness that has meaning generalities as its appearing objects, or has a meaning generality as its appearing object. Number 2, non-conceptual, non-mistaken consciousness that has specifically characterized instead of unique particulars. I don't even know what that means. Though specifically characterized is not, needs some explanation, but never mind. For now, I prefer this word. Specifically characterized phenomena as its appearing object. And lastly, non-conceptual mistaken consciousness that has clearly appearing non-existence as its appearing object. An example of the first is a conceptual consciousness apprehending a vase. An example of the second is a direct perception apprehending form. An example of the third is a non-conceptual wrong consciousness to which a snow mountain appears yellow. The same as, I guess, the other text. This threefold division of cognition is primarily made from the perspective of the appearing object, and follows the system of the Satantrikas, or is represented or represents the system of the Satantrikas. I used follow, whatever. Third, dividing cognition into two types has 6 subdivisions. So here there's some difference in some of the words, I guess. Sense consciousness and mental consciousness. Conceptual consciousness and non-conceptual consciousness. Valid cognition and non-valid cognition. So I guess that's the same. Mistaken cognition and non-mistaken cognition. Mind engaging through exclusion and mind engaging through affirmation. And then mind and mental factors. Not primary mind and mental factors, but mind and mental factors. I think that's the difference. So mind engaging through exclusion. Actually, you could also say cognition engaging or awareness engaging through exclusion. That does make a difference. But the main difference comes now in the explanation. These are explained in the texts by way of 6 methods of division. So different perspectives of division. Sense consciousness and mental consciousness are divided from the perspective of whether they must depend on physical sense faculties as their dominant condition. So whether or not, don't need to say whether or not, but it's implied by the word whether. Conceptual and non-conceptual are divided from the perspective of whether there's the appearance of a sound generality or a meaning generality. Sound generality, meaning generality. Remember, I explained that yesterday. In Tibetan, it just says datun, but it's up to you then to add and or. And since I think or here works better because you can have both, but you can also just have a sound generality appearing. For instance, in the case when you know the word ocean, but you don't know what ocean is. So you can think about an ocean just taking the word to mind versus the scenario or the example when you know what an ocean is, but you have seen one, but you don't know the word. And then, of course, when you know both, what it refers to and the word itself. Okay. So that is the difference between conceptual and non-conceptual. So conceptual, like you have an appearance of a sound generality or a meaning generality versus non-conceptual where that is not the case. Then, valid and non-valid cognitions are divided from the perspective of whether they're newly realizing or incontrovertible with respect to their object. So newly realizing, that's the alternative, or incontrovertible, where here the newly can be applied to the incontrovertible. I believe in Tibetan, there's a slight mistake here. I mean, I'm going to ask one of the geshes. He gave me his WhatsApp contact the other day to check with him, because in Tibetan, they say incontrovertible or newly realizing, where I think it's just an oversight. If they were to say newly realizing first, then the newly would apply also to the incontrovertible, because just being incontrovertible doesn't mean you're newly incontrovertible. I believe that's just an oversight, a typo. I don't know, because this is so clear from so many other texts that you always want to add the newly when it comes to a valid cognizer or a prime cognizer or prime cognition according to the Satantrika. Okay. So valid or non-cognitions are divided from the perspective of whether they are newly realizing or incontrovertible with respect to their object. Mistaken and non-mistaken cognition are divided from the perspective of whether their object exists in the way it appears. So from the point of view of appearance, it's just appearance. So does it exist? And I'll send this to you, of course. I'll check it one more time and then I'll send it to you. Whether it exists in the way it appears. Mind engaging through exclusion and mind engaging through affirmation are divided from the perspective of whether they engage with their objects by dividing them into components. And mind and mental factors are divided from the perspective of whether a given consciousness is primary or secondary, and whether it engages the entity itself or the specific attributes of the object, right? So that's just how I understand this. I must say, I think these books, in particular, also the second volume, is an example of too many cooks. Spoil the broth. Because you had quite a few people involved. I remember years ago, because I know the main translator, she's an amazing translator and she has very good English. However, then there were other editors. I mean, I was sent a part of it. Other people were sent parts of it. And I could see some of the editing that other people had done, and I was in shock. She did a great job. And I called her and I said, "What happened?" And she said, "I don't know." They took it apart. The person who edited it had just studied for a few years. I know this person personally, wonderful person. However, slightly different understanding of the material. So unfortunately, I don't know what happened at the end. And I said to, I mean, Dachin also wanted to do that. So we discussed it to put her foot down. Don't let it happen. You're the main. I don't know whether she did or not. And then there's, of course, someone else involved, a professor. Was a very beautiful, kind person, but hasn't studied this to the same degree. And whoa, some of these words, universals and linguistic referent, I think they, yeah. Well, anyway, it is what it is. There's definitely room for improvement, I guess. I mean, they also want to re-edit things. There's already the edited version. I was just given by one of the geshes the edited version in Tibetan. They even have an edited version in Tibetan. So there's a way to slowly make some adaptations. Okay, great. So that's that. And again, I'll send it to you. And again, also like this is just my personal way of looking at it, and don't take it for granted. Be skeptical and check whether it's correct or not. Does it make sense? Yeah. All right. So let's look at the text. Let's go back to the text, which is now sense consciousness. Let's move on to the this it says second, so I guess the second part uh on the way to classify minds, the second division, whatever. So sense consciousness versus mental consciousness. Okay. And that is pretty straightforward and beautifully explained. I really like this part because you don't really find that in other Lorig texts. It's what you learn. However, I haven't seen it spelled out in that way, haven't explained it in that way. So that's really beautiful. There's 6 categories of consciousness: eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body consciousness, plus mental consciousness. Okay. The first 5 are the sense consciousnesses, each of which arises in dependence on the physical sense faculty, as we know, which is called its own uncommon dominant condition. The word dominant condition is sometimes used for just a condition. So there's a difference, therefore, between an uncommon dominant condition and a dominant condition. Uncommon dominant condition, dominant condition. And there's some debate. Is there any condition a dominant condition or not? Yeah, it's difficult to give a definite answer on that. In the end, I guess there's some room for interpretation. But the point is, uncommon dominant condition and dominant condition are not the same. The last, the mental consciousness, so the last is the mental consciousness, sorry, which arises, oops, just a sec, which arises in dependence on the mental sense faculty, that is its dominant condition. All right, so here it doesn't even mention its uncommon dominant condition. Could be, you could say this uncommon. Yeah, anyway, so it's dominant condition. Form is perceived by the eye consciousness, sound by the ear consciousness, smell by the nose consciousness. Let me just quickly check. Does it say uncommon in Tibetan or not? Oh, yep, it doesn't say uncommon. So it does say just dominant condition. Form is perceived by the eye consciousness, sound by the ear consciousness, smell by the nose consciousness, taste by the tongue consciousness, and touch by the body consciousness. Okay. The 5 sense consciousnesses arise through the functioning of their respective dominant conditions. Very important. Okay, so their respective dominant conditions. Here again, well, I guess also sometimes you say tumumaimba or uncommon first, and you don't have to say it again and again. Sometimes it's just implied. So even if it's not mentioned again, it's like saying in the Heart Sutra, you say once that phenomena don't exist inherently, intrinsically, then you don't have to say it again and again. There's no eye, no ear, no nose. It's by implication. So even if it doesn't mention dominant again, just from the context, it's clear what they're talking about. The 5 sense faculties, Okay, so first of all, so the five sense consciousness arise through the functioning of their respective dominant conditions, the five sense faculties, and their respective objective conditions. I don't know why they didn't say object condition. Okay, object condition is weird, maybe a little awkward, but objective. I have a problem with objective in general. So what I know was the objective was the goal of this particular text, the editor and the other translators, to make it accessible to as many people as possible, even without a background in Buddhism. But then you use the word objective, like definitely doesn't mean aim, so not influenced by personal feelings, interpretations, or prejudice and so forth. But that's not what is meant here. If you use it in a Buddhist sense, usually objective existence means inherent, objectively existent. That's not what this is referring to, kind of independent, objective existence, independent of the mind. So here's just confusing the objective condition. I know it means with respect to the object. Does anyone have a problem like me, or is it just me? Are you confused when you hear objective condition, or is it fine? Because otherwise I won't say it again.
Well, as a French native speaking, it might have, thank you for this explanation, because it could have, for me, I interpret it as something which is put outside, like an object that I observe strictly.
But that's what it is. That's what it is.
Oh,
It is that.
yeah,
Uh,
okay.
that's what it is. It's an external object. So, okay, so you do understand it in the right way. I was just thinking the ordinary meaning of objective, as I just said, free from prejudice, etc. Or in the Buddhist context, as in like independent of mind over there. And the problem is here that the same term is used in all the Buddhist tenet systems. And obviously, they don't all accept objective existence.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, just so something to keep in mind that you know it actually refers to the object, the sense object. Yeah, the
Yeshua,
actual sense
I
object.
never thought about this one. Seriously, I never thought that the objective of objective condition would be somehow related to the objective existence, but I can see how it makes sense.
Okay, it makes sense. Okay, fine. Then that's just me. All right. So in the context, it makes
No,
sense.
no, no, not just you.
Oh,
What you say makes sense. The doubt that you are raising makes sense.
oh, okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, sometimes just bringing it
For
up is a
native
good.
English speakers,
Yeah. Pardon? Go
yeah,
ahead.
native English speakers have it figured out, but non-native English speakers understand just like who said a moment ago, you know? It's funny.
Right. Well, sometimes it's just good. I mean, a lot of our debates and our discussions are about terminology. So at least we debated and discussed terminology here, which is good. Okay. And hopefully it's clear definitely what's meant. So what are the respective objective conditions? The five sense objects of form and so on. Of course, once the example is given, then it becomes clear form and so on. Here again, form, the Tibetan word form, in the context of form, sound, etc., it means visual form. Remember, I said in the beginning, mind and mental factor. If you have that pair, mind and mental factor, then the mind of mind and mental factors refers to a primary mind. Similarly, if we say object and object possessors, then the object refers to an object that is not an object possessor. Likewise, when you have form, sound, smell, and so forth, in that context, form in the context of these other four refers to visual form. But all the five sense objects are also called form, because form, not in the context of these five, as one of those fives, just means physical. Form is another word for physicality. I know in Hebrew that's a word I tried to, when I taught in Israel once, I asked you, what is a good word for form? And I was told it's physicality. So something that is physical. And I guess, yeah, in English you could use that word as well, but it's been established to use form And here the editors and so forth, they didn't choose to use physicality, and I think that's good. Might as well get used to the way it's used in the Buddhist context. Okay, so form and so on. So visual form in this context, because so on means, of course, form, sound, etc. The uncommon dominant condition of the mental consciousness, or here it says the uncommon dominant condition of the mental consciousness is the mental sense faculty. Mental sense faculty is mental consciousness itself. It's mental consciousness itself. So it's actually a previous moment of mental consciousness. For the mental consciousness to be active, you need a previous moment of a mental consciousness. For the sense consciousnesses, you do need a previous moment, except that's not the uncommon dominant condition. It's the immediately preceding condition, as we'll find out later. Plus, you need the sense faculty. So therefore, the sense consciousnesses are more dependent to have more conditions, in other words, are dependent on more conditions than the mental consciousness is. That's why the mental consciousness can arise, can be active without a brain. It doesn't need that uncommon or brain in the case of human beings. I mean, sense faculties, of course. And sense faculties, the texts are very clear. For instance, the sense faculty of the eye consciousness doesn't just refer to the eye. The texts then say they're not very specific about what it refers to, because I guess at the time of the Buddha, I'm pretty sure the Buddha knew, but if he had explained the optical nerve and the brain, I mean, that was not the point. I mean, that was not his job. It was just to say there's something that is part of the eyes and so forth, other factors. There are the sense faculties. They're subtle. Yes, they are. We still don't understand them fully. Even scientists, have like some idea of the working of what happens, but they're still open questions. So it's something subtle. So there's an agreement on the subtle faculties, but they're very clear. It's not just the eye. So the optical nerve, the visual cortex, it all makes sense, doesn't it? All right. So that's the sense faculties. However, for the mental consciousness, there is no need. It doesn't have to depend on. Remember the pages I just read to you that I had retranslated? Whether or not a physical mental faculty is needed or not. The difference between a sense consciousness and a mental consciousness. Okay. Therefore, a distinction is made between. Yes.
So the uncommon
Mhm.
in the definition, does that refer to the physical part of the condition?
Well, in the case of the mental consciousness, they also use the word uncommon, and you don't have a physical faculty. So we'll come to that. What is it? What does it make uncommon? So once we talk about the three types, hopefully becomes a little clearer. So Maya, keep the question, please, and all of you as well. Why uncommon? That's also something we would debate. Why uncommon? Okay. So just keep that question. Why is it called uncommon? Therefore, a distinct.
I
Yes,
also,
please.
I also have a question.
Yes.
Is the dominant condition of mental consciousness and the substantial cause of mental consciousness the same?
Is the uncommon dominant condition or the dominant condition of the mental consciousness and the substantial cause the same? All right. Okay. Does it have to be? What do you think? I don't want to answer it because, well, first of all, you should give it some thought. All right. Is there just one continuum of mental consciousness?
Yeah. I would say I would, yeah, accept.
Okay. The subject, the mental consciousness, it follows you cannot have two running parallel at the same time.
Accept.
Consciousness.
Okay. The subject, great compassion, observing the non-observable. It follows it doesn't exist.
Why?
Because it means that great compassion is directly sustained or directly conjoined with a mind that realizes the emptiness of sentient beings, which is of a different continuum as great compassion. If you study, for instance, Entering the Middle Way by Chandrakirti, in the very beginning, the very beginning, it talks about the 3 types of compassion. Compassion
Yeah.
observing only sentient beings. That's out. That doesn't interest us in the case of this debate. But the second type is compassion that observes the non-observable. Here, the terminology is a little misleading because it's actually not great compassion that observes emptiness. It's that which it runs parallel with. So, in other words, while you have great compassion for all sentient beings, there's another mental consciousness present at the same time, the same strength that realizes the emptiness of all sentient beings. Or in the case of the other type of great compassion that observes the observes phenomena, while having great compassion, you have a mind that realizes parallel. At the same time, they're manifest, they're present, they're active at the same time. Great compassion, focus on all sentient beings, and a mind realizing the impermanence of all sentient beings. So, the subject, this type of compassion, great compassion, it follows there are 2 minds present, 2 mental consciousnesses present at the same time.
Why?
Why? Because it exists. Because this type of great compassion exists, which means they're too active. Right? Okay, the thing is, no, you can say no probation, of course, but okay, let me just say this much. This is a little confusing because it's hard enough to have one mind running, a mental consciousness. It's usually running wild. So to think you have 2 minds parallel at the same time seems a little overwhelming. Right? Now, this question does come up. And sometimes you receive the explanation, the mind is like a river. And what does a river do? It splits out, sometimes into 2, and then the 2 rivers melt into one again. Does that happen?
Yes.
Right? It can happen. Therefore, the explanation sometimes is like the mental consciousness. If you have enough attentiveness, you can actually, once you're quite advanced, these are not minds that we have right now. And we don't even have great compassion. Well, I don't know you, but in my case, of course, it's far away from having that kind of mind. And therefore, no, and I don't realize impermanence or emptiness. However, at a certain point, I guess you have the ability to have 2 minds at the same time.
I have a small
Therefore, just one sec, just to finish that thought, and then you're welcome to ask. So, in answer to your question, is it necessarily the substantial cause? What do you think? If you accept the existence of this kind of great compassion, right? Without saying anything more, just put it out there. So, the fact that you can actually have 2 mental consciousnesses, 2 mental consciousnesses at some time. And so, how about after you had that great compassion and the one mental consciousness merges into one again? Is both of them its substantial cause or not? Right? What is the substantial? You like just think about it. Just to give you some food for thought. Is it really the substantial cause or not? Right? And also,
But can we
yeah.
can we
Oh, go ahead.
can we
Yeah.
say that for an ordinary being who does not have great compassion or has not realized emptiness or impermanence,
At the same time,
this
ordinary. What
this
does
would apply,
ordinary
or
mean?
is it like
Okay.
no? I mean,
Here's
is it
another
like
problem. Yeah. What does
sorry,
ordinary
sorry.
mean? No, that's just the line where it's a little difficult to not
Yeah,
speak at the
yeah,
same time as the connection.
yeah.
But what does ordinary mean? And Bodhisattva on the path of accumulation is said to be an ordinary Bodhisattva. So the
Yeah,
path of
but
accumulation is
someone who doesn't
a
someone who
non-practitioner.
doesn't have great compassion or
Yeah,
emptiness or
yeah, yeah.
impermanence, like
Okay.
most of the people in this room, I guess.
So in the sense of that kind of ordinary. Sorry, now my mind is on debate mode. So if you use the word ordinary and the
Right,
word
right.
ordinary is used, so I'm right away going, oops. But you're right. You're talking about, of course, someone who's not developed spiritually. So what about that person? Think about it. I don't want to answer that. I
I
want you to think
have a
about mental
question.
consciousness. Yes, please, you go ahead. Yes, you had a question.
Well, it's because I'm kind of making the relation with the fact that there's the mind and there's the co-emergent when we talk about mental afflictions. So could it be in the same category? Could we talk about the fact that the dominant condition and the, you know, the ones that substantial cause. So I'm kind of for the moment I have this in my mind. So is it a wrong view or is a wrong way of engaging in this in the reflection about the sense consciousness and the mental consciousness?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Can you
Well,
explain? Uh-huh.
because you just said that it divides into two, it could divide into two. And for the moment, there's mental consciousness and co-emergent of the co-emergent of the mind, which we call about being the mental afflictions or the positive one, the purifier. So as compassion, love. So
All right. Your question is basically, could you just have, as a non-spiritual being, have one mental consciousness and at the same time a co-emergent or a parallel running kind of affliction? Is that your question?
Yes.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. Honestly, it's something you may debate, but it's difficult because about the great compassion, there's no doubt. There is also in our text, but they're very specific to Benjamin Dakba, there is a quote where you can have great compassion and at the same time holding on to the inherent existence or the self of phenomena, self of sentient beings. So you have great compassion, but you also have a self-grasping mind or a mind grasping at the true existence of sentient beings. There's a quote like that, but that's not accepted by everyone, which is why I don't want to bring it in here, since you're not specifically studying Benjamin Dakpa, you're not Drepanoseling, in other words, or Gande Shatse. So therefore, leaving aside that, it's debatable. Can you actually have two minds running parallel, like one mind perceiving the inherent existence of this person and another mind, I don't know, thinking about their person's clothes or something? I don't know. Or is it just alternating very quickly back and forth? I think it depends on the degree of attentiveness.
Okay.
That's why an inattentive awareness, or an awareness to which the object appears but is not ascertained, it arises because there's not enough attention. When an eye consciousness knows, realizes its object, the ear consciousness is no longer active, as it's described, as we come to see in a moment. All right. So again, keep it open to debate. Think about both scenarios. What speaks for it, what speaks against it. And even though the mental consciousness may split into two and then, of course, join together again, does one still act as the substantial cause of the other? So this is something I can answer this way, I can answer in that way. But a better way to get a better understanding is to think about it yourself. So think about it. Okay, great. Yes? Yes, yes.
So,
Do you want the
Dharma,
microphone?
can you hear me?
Yeah, kind of, but maybe easier with the, yeah, great.
Is this better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So we actually just learned today,
Mhm.
we were doing a verse from Dharmakirti where he refutes the Charvaka presentation by saying that if a particle was the cause of mental consciousness, then it would follow multiple mental consciousnesses arise. But since there's only one mental consciousness, that would be an absurd consequence. And our text even says it would follow that in a single person, multiple mental cognitions would arise simultaneously. Is this just a view of the like Madhyamaka,
Satantric.
or
Well, you see, I don't think there's a contradiction. I think it can be a view. I mean, this view is now either Chittamatra or Satantrika, depending on the, bits before or not. But you see, like, you can't have a mental consciousness just pop up like two mental consciousness like that. If as the Charvakas say, a physical object is the main cause, is the substantial cause of mental consciousness, then without having this attentiveness you need, that kind of attention that you need to have two consciousness run parallel, they could just pop up. You see the difference? Right? I mean, you could always argue with your teacher, for instance. You could ask about great compassion observing the non-observable, or great compassion observing impermanence. You could ask about that and see what would this response be. So ask it again, Denzo Yume. But and this is just my opinion, I believe this is unusual. It's unusual to have two mental consciousnesses arise at the same time. That's not what usually happens. However, according to the Charvakas, we should always have mental consciousnesses, many of them, because there's so many physical objects that could give rise to mental consciousnesses. So there's a different situation. But you see, one thing about studying philosophy, I sometimes jokingly say that, but I believe it's actually true. There are certain questions you ask 5 geshes, and guess what? You get 5 different answers. So in the end, you're left with which one works better for you. Or you change around. Oh, for a while you believe this, and for another, and you just try to make it work and see where for yourself you see the most contradictions. And sometimes you don't see any contradictions. And you can't assert both. So you just keep it open. In the end, it doesn't matter. Things are still impermanent and lack inherent existence. So these things, it's not about opinion. However, they're little details. And sometimes it's just for one person's like that, and for someone it may be different. Yeah. So sometimes it's like difficult to say it's the same for everyone. In general, I would say it's difficult to have two perceptions at the same two mental consciousnesses at the same time. But there may be some people who do have two every now and then pop up. But that's not the general situation. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Good. Yeah, that was very good, Venerable Texture. You went back to the second chapter and bring it into very good. So whatever we discuss, think of what you learned as part of the second chapter and see where there's a contradiction. Yeah, very good. All right. Let's look at the text again. Very good questions you ask, and it's all something you may want to bring into your debate as well. Therefore, a distinction is made between the sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousness from the point of view of their uncommon dominant conditions. And now comes this quote from Dignaga. Unusual. Usually you have Dharmakirti. Dignaga is not quoted as much. A sense consciousness is named based on a sense faculty, because this is its uncommon cause. All right, so far it's clear. Its experienced object is a whole. First I thought a whole is a nice translation. However, to give you an alternative, no, I'm not, this is not a criticism. First I was like, yeah, because, you see the whole thing. So in that way, it's true. It's true. But I thought I also looked up the Tibetan. I read it together with the Tibetan, and there it says it's just a general object, not generality, but just a general object, right? Just you look at the wall, you look at the table. So it's just this whole table. This general whole table is a little difficult because you only see one part of the table. When you see the front, you don't see the back. When you see the outside, you don't see the. So then it's not like you see the whole table, but you see this general object, right? Without distinguishing this is this is this, this is that. Okay. Because that sense consciousness is produced by many objects together. What could that mean? Because it is produced by many objects so by many objects together, but it's beautifully explained later on. Because there are many causes and conditions. The light, you have to have the light, you have the table, you have all these different conditions that make it possible for us to see a particular object, such as a table, just this general table. Not a generality, but just table. Okay, a certain part of the table. Okay. Some things having many qualities, some things having many qualities cannot be realized through a sense faculty. So in other words, you look at the table. So the table is impermanent, the table is big, the table is beautiful, the table is brown. Your sense consciousnesses are not able to know all these without the help of a mental consciousness, right? I mean, it gives you the input, it gives you the information, but to later on be able to recollect or to recall, oh, it was blue, it was big, it was impermanent, and impermanent is definitely not an object of your sense consciousness. Smooth, for instance, if you see it with your eye consciousness, the smoothness is really something we can only know with your body consciousness, for instance. It may have a particular smell if it's made of a particular type of wood. Therefore, so in general, you see this object, right? However, when it comes to these detailed features, many of them your eye consciousness has no access to. So you need a mental consciousness. All right. The object of a sense perception is to be known for oneself. It is an entity that cannot be indicated with words. Yeah, try to describe to me the taste of chocolate. If someone has never eaten chocolate, has never eaten something sweet. All right, even sweet, okay, even if you've eaten sweet, but that's of course not enough to describe the taste of chocolate. I guess that's what the text means. That's what I get from also the Tibetan. It's something unique that cannot be indicated with words. This includes mental perception of an object and of attachment and so on. So I suppose this means that it cannot be indicated also with a mental perception or even an object of attachment. Like even attachment doesn't get at the object the way you perceive it with your sense consciousnesses. That's my take on this last line. Not 100% sure, but also from what comes in reading both English and Tibetan. Yeah, that's what I understand, but it could also have a second meaning. And some of these are supposed to have a second meaning because that's how Sanskrit works. Of course, the text was originally in Sanskrit, and the beauty about Sanskrit is that it can convey so many meanings with the same word or with the same phrase. There's something beautiful I learned from a friend of mine, an Israeli. Some of you know him, Boaz. Well, maybe Erin, or of course you know him, yeah, and Maya. So Boaz, he studied Sanskrit, and he told me, he said that there was a text at the time, and that really shows how amazing Sanskrit is. When you read it from the beginning to end, it was a praise to the king, to a particular king. But when you read it from the bottom to the beginning, it was a criticism of the king. So let's hope the king doesn't start from the bottom. So this is I mean, you can't do that in English. Grammatically, it's impossible to read it. I mean, there's some words, there's some sentences that you can read both ways, but there are exceptions. However, in Sanskrit, you can read it this way and the other way. And of course, one phrase can have many different meanings. I'm not even talking about reading from the bottom to the, starting from the bottom. No, just in general. So that gives you the sense of the richness of this language, which wouldn't therefore be surprising. And sometimes in Tibetan you can manage that as well, because the Tibetan grammar is so close to the Sanskrit that you can do that. In English, of course, it's so precise. The grammar is so precise that it's hardly ever possible to express a dual meaning. All right. Anyway, is this clear so far, what I've been saying? Okay, great. So sense consciousness and mental consciousness are not named from the point of view of their objects, but from the point of view of their uncommon dominant conditions. I'm going to debate on that one a little bit. Because you could also say, well, what about sense consciousness being restricted to seeing only, in the case of an eye consciousness, shape and color, versus, and not just shape and color, it's restricted in two other ways. The shape and color has to be in the sphere of vision, in your sphere of vision, plus in the present moment, or at least just a second earlier, right? So from that point of view, and the mental consciousness is not restricted in that way, can take to mind anything, any sense object of the past, present, and future, and as distant as it gets, basically. So sometimes sense consciousnesses can be defined in that way, but okay, they are named from the point of view of their objects. Okay, that is true. Named as in you say I consciousness. I consciousness because the I implies the sense faculty. Oh yeah, it does use eye consciousness. Some people use words like visual consciousness or audio consciousness. I think eye consciousness is a better translation because then it's closer to the Tibetan. So distinguished, yes, from the point of view of how they perceive their objects, however, named from the point of view of, yes, uncommon dominant conditions, eye sense faculty, and so on. And in fact, eye and eye sense faculty are considered to be synonymous in the text, in the philosophical text. That is like, but ordinarily when you speak Tibetan, you don't say, oh, I'm seeing with my eye sense faculty. You just say I, the way we use it in English, right? But in the strict philosophical language, I and eye sense faculty are said to be synonymous. And that's not just one quote, it's all over the text again and again. There's synonymous, just different terms for the same thing. Therefore, they have a different word for the eye, the physical organ. There's a different word. So the eye organ versus the eye organ, the eyeball, if you want, the eyeball. That's not the eye because it's not the eye sense faculty. There's the eyeball. It's not the eye sense faculty, right? It's not the eye. So it takes some getting used to it, but it's like anything. With time, over time, you know how to use the term in a strict philosophical sense. But then when you talk to your neighbor, you can still say I the way we use it on a daily basis. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, for example, although the sound of a drum arises from using a hand or a stick and so on, that's beautiful here. This is quite nice. So you need many different things. Rises from a hand or a stick, and what else do you need? I mean, you need gravity and what have you. Well, maybe not. You can drum it. you can drum. You can make a sound of a drum in space, but never mind. So you need many different things, and it's not so. Nevertheless, it's not referred to as the sound of those things. It's not the sound of the hand or the sound of the stick. The drum is its uncommon cause, and it's hence called the sound of a drum. Right? So even with the objective object or the objective condition or the object condition, even then it's the object itself, right? The object itself. So you talk about the color of a wall, for instance, the color of a wall. It's not the light waves or something. You can still refer to it as the color of a wall, even in the Prasangika school. Although they may agree with scientists, there's no philosophical reason why they would disagree with the fact that the colors we perceive are actually light waves, and then our brain perceives them, or our brain helps us to perceive them mentally in a particular way. So they can assert that, and still they would say, yes, it's the blue object over there, right? Based on what you perceive. So the object condition. All right. So it's not referred to as the sound of those things yet. To give some other examples, when you view a garden containing many types of flowers, even though there are different types of flowers or different kinds of flowers in that garden, they appear to your eye consciousness as a single mass. It's true, right? Just this blur of shape and color. Okay. I shouldn't say blur, but a single mass, yes. If the mind cognitively, and I'm criticizing the text, and it's not fair because some things are really well explained. So I'm picking out, it sounds like I'm critical of this whole text, but I'm not. Some of these parts are really beautifully worded. And I think that's Dechin, because she's an amazing translator. They appear to your eye consciousness as a single mass. If the mind cognitively selects a particular variety of flower, and apprehends it, that cognition has now gone beyond the bounds of sense consciousness and has entered the domain of mental consciousness. Makes sense, right? So what kind of flower is it? Where is it found? And so forth. The problem, the difficulty for us is that we're not aware of that. I mean, when you're looking at an object, most dominant in that moment is probably the eye consciousness at a particular moment. we're not aware of that narrator. You know, like there's something constantly interpreting what we're seeing. That's the mental consciousness. But depending on just looking at the sunset, this beautiful white snow mountains that Maya posted the other day. That just popped up on my, I was like, wow, down there, it looks so pretty. We have all these houses, so I have to kind of lean to the side to see it, see the snow mountain from my balcony. But from where you are, and it's like, whoa, you're just looking at that, and we're not aware of the mental consciousness in that moment, although it's active. But then before long, we get bored, and the mental consciousness sets in. And we're maybe more aware of the mental consciousness, but they're actually happening simultaneously. And that is sometimes, or it's not just sometimes, it's usually difficult to separate, right? We're not aware of the difference. Surely, if you eat a nice candy and you look at the mountain, it's pretty straightforward that there are different consciousnesses at play. But with the mental consciousness, it's different. It's ever present, but not always that dominant. Okay. All right. So if the mind cognitively, yes. Also, if a visible form appears to eye consciousness at the same time as a melodious sound appears to ear consciousness, then the object towards which an inclination, actually it says the motivation in Tibetan. It doesn't say inclination. What is an inclination is kind of like, I'm not talking about a physical inclination, like the mountain being kind of inclined, not like that, but a mental disposition or preference. Right? A mental disposition or a preference, kind of like a tendency, if you like. All right. So my initial inclination was to, I don't know, refuse the offer or whatever. So here, inclination, okay, it says gulung in Tibetan, which is motivation. So the wish to hear or the wish to see, which you're more strongly habituated to. That's what it says in Tibetan. So she uses the word, or whoever did, inclination, and then explains, instead of saying motivation, maybe that's too strong, because the Tibetan word, the English word motivation can sometimes feel a little stronger than the Tibetan. So I think she does it really well, or whoever did that. So I guess it was Dejin. So the wish to hear or to wish to see, which is to do with our habit. So then inclination again works because we're more inclined towards, focusing on the sound versus uh, the visual object. But it actually means just dependent on what we're more habituated to, the wish to hear something or the wish to see something. And it's usually a wish to hear, to see. However, it depends on the sound, of course. If it's our favorite song, then we may want to listen to that, or if we love birds. Yeah. Will be the only object that the sense consciousness comes to apprehend and determine on that occasion. This is a literal translation from the Tibetan, but the Tibetan, how can I put it? You understand it differently. The words are exactly the same, but it's understood differently. In the sense that the sense consciousness doesn't determine things. To determine something, ngeba in Tibetan. Sometimes the word ascertain is so ngeba usually means certainly. So if it's not used as a verb, it means certainly. Ngebardu. I will certainly do this. Or ngeba used as a verb means to ascertain. Here, determine. Okay, fine. Determine is usually denla baba, but it's okay. Determine works as well. However, that is only done with a conceptual mind. Only a conceptual mind can ascertain, can determine. It's much more of an active kind of way to engage your object, which the sense consciousnesses are lacking. Which is why also when we say an awareness to which the object appears but is not ascertained, the ascertainment has nothing to do with the sense consciousness. It has to do with the mental consciousness. The mental consciousness having to ascertain or not. Sorry, yeah, go ahead. You wanted to ask something.
A small doubt, and that is, you just said something about how the sense consciousness is perceiving something, and then the mental consciousness is simultaneously applying some kind of interpretation or focus. Is that not the same as having two different consciousness active at the same time?
Yes, it is. Because the mental consciousness and the sense consciousness is you see, the thing is that the mental consciousness is always present. There is never a time when the mental consciousness is not present. So therefore I ask you, is it possible to have the mental consciousness and another consciousness present?
Agree. Accept.
Yeah, because you have to accept it, because otherwise you wouldn't have an I consciousness present ever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm,
So the
mhm.
fact that the mental consciousness is always present, right? Even when you're fainting, when you're sleeping, it's always present. So even if it's just nothingness, blanketness, as Shmuel calls it, appears to the mind, that's still an object and it's still there. Okay. Maybe subtler, of course, but still there.
Geshema?
Mhm.
I also wanted to ask about the previous paragraph, actually. You said that the eye and the eye sense faculty are different.
No, synonymous.
No, no, synonymous. The eyeball, sorry, the eyeball, the eye and the eye sense faculty are different.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, because the eye sense faculty is a part of the eyeball, then this distinction seems not important.
The eye sense faculty is a part of the eyeball. The subject, the eye sense faculty, it follows it's a part of the eyeball.
Why?
You
Because
wait. No. Shmuel, you're not allowed to say why. You just said that. You have to say I accept. No. I'm kidding. But you just said it doesn't seem to be correct because the eye sense faculty is a part of the eyeball. So then
yes,
I
I
debated.
accept.
Yeah, or you accept. Okay, again, so the subject, the eye sense faculty, it follows it's a part of the eyeball.
Except the others say why.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I can hear that. And it's okay. It's good to ask. But the point is, so the subject, the eye sense faculty, it follows it is not a part of the eye sense, the eyeball, because it's also part of the brain.
Yeah. Well,
It follows that it's more pervasive than merely pervading the eye sense, the eyeball, for it pervades more than that. When you say it's a part of that, you're restricting it to just be a part of the eye sense ball. But regarding this, the subject, the eye sense, the eyeball, it follows all you need to perceive something is it.
so I would say the tree is not established that it's a part of the brain
Okay.
also.
All right. The subject, a functioning eyeball. It follows whoever has it in their continuum must be able to see.
Why? Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. You see, I remember there's a friend of His Holiness. He was injured in Ireland. He's come many times to Dharamsala. He's blind. But there's nothing wrong with his eyeball itself.
Mm.
He was hit in the head by a rubber bullet, and that destroyed a part of his visual cortex to such an extent that despite his optical nerve and even the optical nerve and the eyeball being fully being intact, being undamaged from that injury, he can't see. So you see, the eye sense faculty cannot only be part of the eyeball, because this would be an example of someone where that is the case, where he can't see despite a fully functioning eyeball.
But don't some texts describe the eye sense faculty as a clear matter in the shape, which has a specific shape and is located in the eyeball or in the eye organ?
In the eye.
In
In
the
the
eye.
eye.
In the eye, in the eye they're located, so then they're located within themselves.
Yeah, a clear shape. This is a little bit tricky, to be honest. I tell you, there's more that I'm not sure you can accept it with this shape. It's usually the Abhidhamma Kosha, and His Holiness has expressed it on a few occasions that he's not the greatest fan, understandably, because like having a certain shape, that is really difficult. And secondly, it even goes as far as the eye sense faculty was passed on from one life to the next. Huh? So you have like we have some in some commentaries it mentions that. Yeah, that's a little bit difficult unless you talk about the subtle energy that is part of it, which of course there's a subtle energy that goes along with the sense faculties. It's not just the actual matter, and that of course is passed on from one life to the next, especially well, considering the tantric explanation which I'm bringing in here, of course not accepted by the Satantrika, but just saying in general. So therefore, yeah, it's a little bit problematic, that one. It is in the text, but not everything that is in the text is accepted. So to give you my personal opinion, I don't believe it's kind of like half moon shaped or whatever it says, right? Yeah, I think that's a little difficult. And then also in the eyeball, no. I mean, it's obviously more than that. It pervades more than that. And I think people knew that also at the time when the Buddha was around. And in the commentaries, I think, yeah, therefore it's kind of like understanding that it's subtle, something we don't really know, even though you know how an eyeball, you know, how that functions, but there's simply more to it. And the part of the brain is important. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for your questions. I think we're done. It's 3:00 now. I mean, if you don't mind me to go a little over, I have no problem with that, but no. No, it's your day. Yeah, I pardon?
No, we have a class at 3:30, but we could go another
Yeah.
minute.
No, then you need a break. Okay. And I know it's tea time. No. Okay, never mind then. It's fine. We've got enough time. So great. Let's stop here. And all that's left to do is the dedication.
Having thoroughly investigated in accord for all that I've heard, daily reasonings,
Mind-born and reflection of the topics of contemplation, may this discernment settle all doubts.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And see you on Monday, right? For those of you who are there. Okay. Great. Okay. Thank you.
Well, I thought it was